Okay, next up is Nick Davenport. He's a member of Solidarity, and he's written about socialism and ecology for Against the Current.
Thanks, and just a little bit of self-promotion. I do have an article on this subject in the current issue of Against the Current, which we have on the table here. We also have some great literature from the ISO, so if you want to come check it out at the end, that would be great. So Heather outlined very well why the present system can't solve the crisis. Question then is, what's the answer? It's probably not a surprise that I think the answer is socialism. But I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes trying to elaborate on what I think that means for the relationship between society and the environment. I don't know if people were at David Harvey's talk that he gave in Baltimore earlier this year. He says something there about the environment that I really liked. He said a lot of other things that I really didn't like. I thought most of his talk was not very good. But he said one thing that I really liked, which is that we need to find ways of expanding the realization of human potential while shrinking society's ecological footprint. In other words, we need development but not growth. I like this a lot because it recognized that there is a necessity for us to change our way of living, but it was different from something that you hear a lot among environmentally conscious people, which is that, you know, people in the United States just need to accept a lower standard of living. I can understand where that idea is coming from, but I don't agree with it. For one thing, that approach is not going to win. Austerity is already lowering the standard of living for people in the working class, and people just aren't going to accept more, and we can't be a new austerity from the left. Secondly, I don't think it's true. Certainly, capitalists and the rich are going to have to accept life without huge houses and multiple TVs, but for the rest of us, I think what we need to do is find ways of producing things that meet people's needs in different ways so that our standard of living will be different but better. I think this is going to take not only a change in production, but a total restructuring of society to make the economy and politics more democratic. We can't know exactly what this society in which we expand human potential while respecting ecology will look like, because it'll have to be decided democratically, and you know, these processes are always pretty messy, but we can envision some aspects. I would certainly envision more free time, because people would spend less time producing crap that other people don't need. That would mean we would have more time to spend on leisure, play, making art, producing technological innovations so that we could produce even more efficiently, and other great stuff like that. So we'd have more variety in how we spend our lives, so life would be more fulfilling. I think we could restructure production so that people feel a closer connection with the production of food and the resources that they need to live. I would envision neighborhood cooperatives for domestic labor, or what's considered domestic labor now, like laundry, childcare, cooking, which would not only be more efficient, it would also eliminate the distinction between productive and reproductive labor, and with it the gendered division of labor, which is a basis for women's oppression. I would envision more parks, more gathering spaces for social interaction that's not centered on consumption, and overall just a general social transformation that would give people the freedom to live more fulfilling lives that were less centered around consumption. I think that in these circumstances, the level of people's consumption in the developed world would naturally decrease without anybody forcing people to accept a lower standard of living. That being said, I do think we need to recognize that if we want to ensure a world that is both socially just and ecologically sustainable, a lot of the world does need more stuff. I don't think there's any way around the fact that a lot of people in former colonial countries need better transportation and utility infrastructure, better communications and medical technology. We have to find different and ecologically sustainable ways to produce those things, but I think it's essential that we recognize that necessity. I do think it's physically possible to do all this. There are a lot of things that we could do right now if we had a society that valued what's good for people and the environment over profit. I can't list all of them, but I can give some examples. For example, we could eliminate a lot of waste. We could get rid of most product packaging, which mostly just serves to advertise the product and make it look like you're getting more than you actually are. We could eliminate planned obsolescence, so make computers and phones and cars, if we want to have cars, last longer. That way we can produce fewer of them, but everybody can still have them. We can reduce imports and exports by producing locally where that's most efficient. Right now there's a huge amount of totally unnecessary agricultural exporting, just because countries, try to compete with each other to supply the most amount of corn or whatever. We could get rid of that and just have people produce locally where that's most efficient. That would save a lot of energy. We could eliminate a lot of industries just wholesale. We could get rid of the military. It doesn't do anything good for people. We could get rid of advertising. We could get rid of health insurance if we did have universal health care. We could get rid of the financial industry if we didn't have rich people looking to make more money by not doing any work by putting it into the stock market. So we could get rid of a lot of waste that way. We could also make better use of the technology that we already have. We could convert our power generation to solar, wind, geothermal, and tidal. We could redesign our cities around walking, biking, and public transit, and restructure land use so that transit distance is reduced, as well as the physical footprint of developed areas is smaller. We could incorporate organic agriculture and permaculture techniques, and instead of what we do now, which is where there's a new technological innovation, we use it to everybody to produce more. Instead, we could use it to produce the same amount, but have everybody work less. So produce less while maintaining the same standard of living. I'm sorry, I'm tripping over my words a little bit. I'm a little nervous.
You're doing fine.
All right. Now you can make the argument that this won't be enough, that we've already ecologically passed the point where we must accept a dramatically lowered standard of living in order to avoid extinction. I don't really know how to evaluate those arguments. I'm not a scientist. Plus, there's a certain degree of uncertainty here. The Earth is an extremely complex system, so we can't really know everything that's going on with it. But it seems to me that the kind of social transformation that I've outlined here, where we both develop human potential and aim to regenerate a healthy biosphere, is the only way where we could regenerate a healthy biosphere. I don't think we can do that without meeting human needs. If we don't do that, then people who are left without resources will try to get by as best they can using the means available to them, which in many cases will tend to be the most ecologically destructive means. For example, a lot of poor people all over the world burn wood for heating and cooking fuel, contributing to deforestation. If we could give them something else to heat their houses with, that wouldn't happen. I think it's clear that none of this can be done without a revolutionary political change in society. I think we would need to take control of the economy from the rich 1% and institute democracy in the economy, both at the workplace level and at the national and international levels. I think we would need to eliminate imperial wars and the US's global military. We would need to institute a large-scale industrial conversion away from fossil fuels. We would need to implement indigenous sovereignty and take control of the land out of the hands of rich landowners and global corporations the world over and put it into the hands of the farmers who actually use the land. We would institute people's ownership of natural resources, of utility infrastructure, of public transit. We would have to overcome the legacy of colonialism by canceling the third world debt and instituting reparations to the former colonies for ecologically friendly development. I think there's no other way forward than liberating ourselves at the same time as we transform our relationship to nature. I know that's kind of a tall order, and we'll have to struggle for it pretty hard. Sometimes people kind of suggest that we can't really afford to struggle for other things than ecological sustainability because that struggle is so urgent. I sympathize with that, I see where it's coming from, but I don't agree with it because I think every aspect of society is related, is linked to the relationship of society to nature, so that means all struggles for liberation are relevant to solving the ecological crisis. I'll give a few examples. Around the world, struggles around control of land for landless people's rights and indigenous sovereignty are exploding. These are obviously relevant to solving the ecological crisis. Also, urban struggles for resources, like for water or for public transit. These are growing more and more urgent with austerity increasing, and they're also relevant to solving the ecological crisis. There are struggles for workers and people's control of the extraction industries, such as the struggle against mountaintop removal mining in Appalachia. There's the anti-war struggle. There are labor struggles in which workers are bringing together the demands for a decent livelihood and ecological sustainability. For example, in Detroit, there's a group of auto workers who are fighting for jobs demanding that closed auto plants be reopened to build public transit vehicles. There are struggles against environmental racism, and finally even directly ecological struggles such as those against fracking and climate change are linked with all these other struggles because they're struggles to defend people's lives and livelihoods. They're struggles in the interest of the working class. So I don't think it's a question of bringing together these struggles or bringing ecological demands into these other struggles. I think the struggles are already united if we see what's really necessary in order to overcome all these problems. I think what we need is a strong and politically independent working class movement. I think that's going to be best able to, in the short run, force concessions around ecology and other issues from the ruling class, and in the long run is what's going to be able to create a new society. So I think that as we're working towards these goals, we need to be building that kind of a strong movement. We need to be working to unite the various forces of liberation that exist now around a program of social transformation, and working to highlight the ecological dimension of those struggles.